Hello class, this is Professor Wallach, and we're going to go over texture, materials, shaders. So now this week we're actually going to apply color and actually give the texture and shader to the models you've been building. Um, we need to talk about some common terms. And the three terms that you will see over and over is texture, shader, and material. Now we got to start with texture because we go back to the mid late 80s. Basically, this is usually the words we'll refer to an image file, and this is basically what's been applied to the model. You'll hear base color is the term that you'll see later on. Mid to late only used textures, and they only used it for the base color, and that's pretty much what they're doing. There's a few cases where you'll see texture refer to some procedural pattern, like I made a checkerboard, I made something with noise, whatnot. Rare usage of it, but basically that. But ideally, for the most part, most of the time you'll be referring to an image file. Now, there'll be more than one types of texture files as we go on. We'll go over when we go over the properties of a material, common material. We'll talk more about that. The next term you need to that comes up is called shader, and essentially is any code that is being run to rendering a mesh. And I'm using the term rendering because it doesn't make sense to use the word shader. Basically, how the surface of a mesh is rendered is the shading process. And it includes not, it's a process with, the properties of the material, the mesh itself, and also lighting. Now, shaders can vary from very simple, like I'm just putting a base color on a mesh, to complex calculations like I'm making water for the sea and it's rippling and it has all sorts of things that happen around different interactions. They can get very complicated. And you'll see that when you get to those very complicated shaders, GL, SL, or HLSL. So this is the GL as in OpenGL shader language, or HL, which is high language shader language. These are the two most popular shader languages. There's a few others out there, but ultimately these are the two that have taken hold. And we're not going to dive into how to write those type of shaders. That's not the focus of this class, really. But where this goes is that where we've used these shaders, what has happened is that we now collect all of these properties, like whether the shader, texture properties, whatnot, are collected in what we now call a material. And before we had shaders, we actually had materials first. It was basically we had properties of how we apply this material, this texture to this. It became a texture to the mesh has a material applied to it. And this is how we basically apply what is applied to a mesh today. And that's basically the big thing you should understand. Material is what is actually applied to the mesh. A shader is code that is rendering the mesh and has the properties. And every material has at least one type of shader. It may have multiple shaders. And then texture, basically, it is is data related to usually an image file, but it can be procedurally generated as well. That is basically a property of a material at this point, or property within a shader essentially. We need to talk. So as we go forward, we're going to basically talk primarily about physically based rendering, and that's pretty much the standard of how things are being done today. And it's been this way for over a decade at this point. Now the version of PBR that I'm pointing out here is called GLTF PBR. It's a royalty Now GLTF is a royalty specification for loading scenes and models by engine applications, and it's an industry standard basically, and particularly GLTF materials is a specific specification for PBR materials, and it's maintained by the Kronos group. We'll talk about them in one sec. But if you go to kronos.org GLTF/PBR, you can find all of the information about physically based properties. Now we're going to go over the core material, the core properties in this lecture, but there's more that have been added to the standard at this point. We need to talk about the Kronos group. And basically, GLTF is maintained by the Kronos group. It is a nonprofit devoted to maintaining industry standards, and it's comprised by industry members. So, like Microsoft is part of that, Activision is part of it. They're all Autodesk is there. Adobe's part of it, and basically the point for the Kronos group is basically they maintain other standards as well, including OpenGL, Vulkan, which are 3D rendering, OpenXR, which is great for mobile develop, not mobile, but extended reality development, and WebGL. I mean, they basically the Kronos group was founded to maintain all of these standards. As a collectively to maintain these standards, so there isn't just there's an organization that maintains all of them, and that's the thing is that again, what we're using is basically where this industry has basically gone to and basically said this is the standard that we are going to go with. You'll see other versions, but there are other implementations. That's why you see like particularly in 3ds Max, the material we're going to use is going to be the GLTF material standard. Again, if you want to know more about the Kronos group, go to kronos.org/about to find more information. All right, let's talk about the PBR properties. So these are the properties of a material. These are the core properties, but there are others that have been implemented based on future. So this is the first standard that's about. They implemented in 2017 the first standard. So this is all was in the first batch. There's more properties that have been added since then. And then you can go to the Kronos website. You can find all that information. But these are the ones you'll see on a regular basis and have been the core for the most part for PVR rendering for quite a while. So base color. You will also see this called diffuse and sometimes called albedo. Albedo particularly is from Unity. But base color basically is the surface of the material. So if you wanted wood grain, that the color and the definition of that wood grain would be in the base color. If you wanted like a metal band going around a barrel, that metal band portion would be the silver looking portion of it that would be that would define that portion of the material. The next property is normal, aka normal map. So you will see an older version of this also called bump map. Bump map basically is a black and white material that basically determines basically think of it as that it's pushing up and down on the surface essentially, and it's a way to add more material, detail into the material without having to generate vertices. So the bump map is basically a black and white. Basically, it's a single value, whereas a normal map basically the RGB values are essentially calculated into XYV values, which generate a vector which determine the direction of that particular pixel on the material. And that again, giving you a way to give you more data to bring in more detail into a model without having to go and do vertex itself. And basically the normal map most of the time is generated. There's basically two ways. There's ways to take a 2D image and generate the normals, and there's also a way to take a high-res 3D model and cast it down onto a lower poly 3D model. Building the normal map is not the purpose of this material. It's for you to know that there exists. All right, the next two is metallic and roughness, and these basically are values from 0 to 1, each of these, and it's basically how metallic it is, the properties of metallic. So like with metallic, basically, if a high metallic object basically is going to be very reflective. Roughness basically is how well that reflection is. So a low roughness is going to be very reflective. So like you could have like a low metallic, low roughness, and that could be like a plastic. Whereas like rocks is going to be a low metallic but a high roughness, or it could have a higher metallic, a medium metallic, and then a high roughness. So there's different properties, and this is one of those if you wanted to get into it, this is where you go down, you do research on what sets of metallic, what set of roughness is what you'd be looking for. The next is emissive. Basically, so emissive basically says this material is essentially giving off light. It's a fake light that's being giving off, and we can set that property, how it gives off light through here. Alpha coverage, or alpha, or is basically the transparency of the texture. So if you wanted, for the material to, basically pop out, it basically, cut out of like let's say you have a plane, and it's a circle. Then you use the alpha to determine that this portion of the mesh won't be drawn. These pixels are basically not going to be shown because of the transparency. And then there is ambient occlusion. And basically, this ambient occlusion means that helps setting up soft shadows. Basically, it's a way to help set up soft shadows, and that's pretty much what that is. You won't see that out of the box. You're not going to be making ambient occlusion out of the box, but you should know what it is. And then there are many other properties that have been added to the standard. And if you're going to go down the route of being a material specialist or a shader specialist, then you'd learn all of those. But basically the ones that you're going to play with the most. Ambient occlusion is probably the least, but it's one of the core ones. But alpha, emissive, roughness, metallic, normal, base color, you'll play with these at some point. Now, before we get into the mesh, to materials themselves, we need to talk about smoothing. And smoothing basically is something that it's applied in groups on the mesh itself, and it basically says these faces are going to be, the lighting on these is going to be rendered as a group. And that gives us a smooth, again, it simulates smoothing. Basically, so if you can see on the left, the cylinder doesn't have any smoothing groups applied to it. And you can see each face is rendered differently. Whereas the one on the right, there's this smoothing of the lighting around it. And it gives us, the illusion of two faces being smooth, not being two different faces, but one face. It basically gives us one face as opposed to two faces being rendered. And the lighting is smooth across that in that regards. So that's the big difference between the two. You should know, we'll talk a little bit about smoothing groups in the engine for, in 3ds Max. Pretty much, you set that in 3ds Max, and then, whether it's Unity or Unreal, we'll apply that properly. The other thing that we need to talk about is UV mapping. Okay, so we have a model in 3D space, and the coordinates are in X, Y, Z. When we take that model and we flatten it out, we go into it's the UV, specifically it's a UVW is the space that we're talking about. And it's basically taking that 3D space and flattening it out on a plane so that we can map a 2D image to it. So we have a texture, basically it's going to be later, we're using texture right now, but it will be a material that is applied to the mesh. And how that material is applied to the mesh is through the UV map. And that gives us an idea how that material is being applied to the model, so it's rendered when it's rendered, how it's rendered in 3D. And those are the big terms you need to know right now to get up to speed. So we're going to jump now to 3ds Max, and I've made 3 models. There's 3 models right here. I've got a cube here, which I'm actually going to make into an editable mesh, and I'll make this one into an editable mesh as well. I made it editable. There we go, editable mesh. And then I've made this tree right here. And basically, we're going to make some materials right now so that we have an idea. So I'm going to bring up the material browser. And I'm going to, again, set this to be the GLTF material. And for my purposes right now, I am going to just play with the base color. And these first two, we're going to the first one we're going to play with base color. And I'm looking for a bitmap, which is basically 3ds Max version of saying I want a texture file that's a texture. And so one thing that you'll want to do is that basically, so right now I've made a file called lab7 demo. And you want to do save your file before you start making materials. And basically, this is going to be the first material I'm going to bring in. These are 2 more materials I'm going to bring in, and then I've got a folder here that's a PBR material, with more properties here that we will put this all together. It's going to make a mortar wall. And it's going to give we've got the albedo, which is again the basically the basic color. We've got a normal map. We have a metallic map here. We have a roughness map. We have a height map. If we were using that, we could use this instead. And then I want to say this is the inclusive. We'll worry about that later on. But let's make our first material. So we're going to go in, and we're actually going to go into that folder right there, and I'm going to bring in this dice texture. And I can click and drag it. And we'll come back and you see that it's been applied. I'm going to bring in, let's just keep going, and we're just going to make all these right now. And this one is going to be, and this one's going to have bark. Make another GFL material. Anyway, we'll just throw this onto here right now. You can see that's bark. The next one we're going to make is another GF material. And we're going to select leaves in this one. And this is going to be, again, now when we come back to the tree, we're actually going to apply these materials differently. But I'm just showing you that these are these basic materials right now. Again, we're going to go in, we do a GFL material, and in this case, this is the one where we're going to set the base material. Again, it will be a bitmap. I won't. And we're going to go in here, and this is basically going to be again, the albedo is going to be our material. Now I'm going to go apply this one to this right here. We're coming a little bit closer so we can get a better look at this model as it changes. So we've set this bitmap right now. Metalness. Basically, there is doesn't have alpha node. Yeah, occlusion. Okay. Doesn't have an alpha. Doesn't need an alpha mode. It's opaque. It's opaque, mask, and blend for 3 modes. So basically, if you've got a transparent, you're going to be using mask or blend, depending on how you want that to be set. This doesn't have a transparency. So it does have a metal map. It is going to go back. We're just going to go to bitmap. And here is the metallic. We'll just go through and just basically we're going to set again all bitmaps. Height. Yeah, here's the roughness. And you can see, now it's not showing up just yet, but the next one, the normal, this is the one that's going to make it really stand out. Now, we could have used basically a height map, but we're going to go straight to use the normal set. Either you're going to use a height map or you're going to use a normal. So here's the normal map, and by adding that, you should have you can see that there is, you can see that it's giving more detail. Let me try and, I may not be getting it. So let's, hold on right now. Let's do a quick render. Is it not rendering? Oh, I don't have a light, that's why. So it's taking a while. But you can see there the detail coming in. It's not coming, again, I don't have the lighting on here at the moment, but you can see the detail on that surface now getting applied via the normal map. I don't have any lights applied, so it's not showing this as well as it could be. But you can see that detail, and that's the point what's going on. We throw this into three other, like Unity or really Unreal. That normal map is going to pop in and it's going to make things much better. Let's go back one more. There was one more map to apply. And this was the occlusion map. And this was, again, a bitmap. And this is roughness. There we go. Open that. And so here is that cube completely mapped out completely. Now, when we go to the tree, we really want two materials applied to it. And the way that we do this is we will create a material called multi-sub-object. And I'm going to discard the old material. Yeah, and definitely discard the old material. Don't worry about it. First thing you'll want to do is set the number of materials. In this case, is going to be 2. Now, I could have more, but I'm going to just stick with these 2. And essentially, basically, I'm going to give IDs the ID 1, ID 2. So I'm going to set the bark to be 1, and I'm just going to copy this. And so the idea here is now I have a material that has parameters that link to other materials. And this is important. Like if you were to do this in Unreal or Unity, if you wanted multiple material channels, you use a multi-sub-object to get that on the object. And there's sometimes where, hey, I mean, I made materials in this case, but I could have easily just done like a red and a blue and assigned those in here, done the work I needed to do here, and then gone into Unreal or Unity and assigned materials that I wanted. Now, the benefit of using these materials as they are right now is that we can map them accordingly. So let's go, and we're going to actually apply this to the mesh. All right, we are now going to go to. I'm going to select the L. So there's 2 elements here. The first thing that you want to do anytime you're dealing with, I need to pull this out a little bit more. Anytime you're dealing with faces, here we go, surface properties. IDs, start by setting everything to ID number 1. And this is so that you have all the IDs, like set the whole model to 1. And make sure that you've got everything set to a material ID just in case. For the most part, I'm actually going to turn off. So I'm going to turn off smoothing. I'm going to select turn on smoothing group 1 on the bottom half. And so ID 1s, typically smoothing groups and ID go together. And there's a hack, like I know, like Source Engine. So this is, we go back 10, 15 years. Material ID, smoothing groups kind of went hand in hand. Doesn't have to be so today, but you may get a scenario where like, oh, this ID and this smoothing group aren't the same. That's because the engine's trying to enforce that, which was an optimization from like, again, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like Source Engine enforced that, for example. And I'm just going to go up to the top, this, because I'm selecting my element. I'm just going to leave this without smoothing group 1, leave smoothing group 4 on. Actually, I'm going to turn off smoothing group 1, just put on smoothing group 2. I'm going to set ID 2. And you can see that the material changed to be the leaves. And that's basically, this is basic, you know, and the idea here is that I'm not teaching you to be great artists or to be specialists here. I'm teaching you that you can get in here, get some materials, throw them onto a model, and off the races you go. That's the purpose of this, of what I'm trying to teach you. It's more, rather than you're going in and you're painting brush strokes into the materials themselves, it's more like you're putting wallpaper on your meshes, and that you're getting them up into a scenario where you can go and run with it further. All right, so I've shown you how to set this up. The next thing that we are going to do is we're going to talk about how to deal with shapes. Like for example, I'm going to take, let me select this cube, and we're going to go. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to. I'm going to extrude this. So this is a 50 by 50 cube. I'm going to extrude this 20 units. So it's now 20 units up, and I'm going to bevel this in -20. And I've gone too far. We'll go -10. There we go. So we've got now this. Now this has been. Not went too far as well. We'll do a bevel -5. There we go. So we will have to come back and fix this. Now, there are two ways to handle this. I'm going to do, since I'm here, let's bring down the modifier list. So at this point, when you are texturing a model, basically you've done modeling the idea here is that you've now done the modeling portion. That's done, and now the material UV process is the next step that's going to happen. We'll see that there are basically the modeling is the first step. There is the material process, which is the next step that we're dealing with, and then after that there will be a third step, which you've got to get one done to get two done, so that you can then do a third step, what we'll see shortly later on for and that's for rigging for animation specifically. So basically you need to have so if you have to go back and model things. Basically, that means you have to redo the material side of it. And if you did anything with rigging, in some cases, you'll have to go back and change that as well. So I'm going to go. So we're going to pull down the modifier list. Now, when we start using these modifiers, basically you're going to use. Basically, for the most part, right now, you're going to use them, and then you're going to collapse the stack, because unless there's one reason why you wouldn't. We'll get to that one case later on. That's for rigging, but for right now, our what we want is down is UV map and unwrap UVW. So we're going to start with UV map because this is going to be simpler. Basically, this is clearly wallpapering, throwing things on the wall. We'll click on UW map, and then we'll say, now it's saying it's using a planer. We'll use a box, and then we'll scroll down, and we can click fit, and we'll fix the box to, and I need to go back to my editable mesh, and I need to select what I'm mapping, and I'm going to go back to it. Now if I click map, you can see that the cube has now basically moved itself. The box is bounding what I have selected. I know this is right. This is hard to view, but I know this is just part of 3ds Max. We can go back. We can see that now. Hey, that has basically mapped it pretty nicely in terms of the box. So it's this side, this side, this side, and this side. There are other shapes. There's cylinders. There's spheres we could have gone with. Again, this is more, hey, use the shape again with here, use the shape that makes sense for what you're trying to do. Face is kind of weird. Basically, it's going to map by each individual face. It's not what you typically would use. I've rarely, and then XYZ UVW is like, okay, it's not really, not anything that's meaningful in terms of what we want. So I'll go back to box because that's what we want. Yeah, you usually use planar, cylindrical, spherical, or box are the ones. The idea is we're taking a shape and we're basically think the box. For each box, each of the sides is casting onto the side. If it was a sphere, basically, I think we're casting like the material from that sphere down onto the model. And this is again wallpaper. Think wallpapering, and we're going in and we're wallpaper this around. And that's what you map. And this is, for the most part, going to be the primary way you're going to go and make your UV maps. It's going to be through UV map. And I'm just going to just collapse. Use collapse all. Yes, and it's going to say, do you want to move everything? And that's fine because we want to bake that into the mesh itself. And that's something that it's an old habit from 3ds Max, from older, that was taught for me from people who've used it from older editions, but it's still a good practice still. And now we've got our model, as an editable mesh at this moment. Now we've got the cube, this die right here, and basically you can see the material here and set up, this material set up in a weird way to force the UV mapping. And I'm going to select this face right now, and we're going to go down to UV map. I'm going to go UV map, and you're using UVW map, so you're using the W here. And what we can then do is I've used map again. What I want is unwrap UVW. And then basically what we want to go is click on Open UV Editor. It's going to bring up another window right here. And this is not going to make any sense until we go bring down here, and we want to basically do the basically we've got checker patterns, but we want to do map 1, which is basically what basically because we didn't name it, but that's what we want, and that's now what the material that we're playing with. We can affect this by we can select this by pixels, we can select it by edges. Here we go. They're down here now. So I can go in and I can, again, pick the vertices and be like, oh, I'll go here, and I'll grab you, and I'll go here. And I can go in and I can do this by hand, which, for better or for worse. And we'll come back here and you can see that, hey, I've got the one. And I can zoom in and there's still, I can work on this and then I'm going to go to my editable mesh. No, I'm going to collapse all. There we go. So I want to bake that UV mapping into the mesh itself now. And then I'm going to select a different face. And I'm going to pick this, and we'll do this again. Unwrap UVW. We'll open the UV editor. Again, we'll show the material that we want. And then I'm going to grab all of these. In this case, I'm going to scale these down. you move it into place effectively. So there's multiple tools. So there's a scale tool. There's a freeform, but you can rotate the selected objects. You can scale them, move them, mirror them. So there's a lot more here. Again, I'm just showing you like basically like, hey, I need to go in and adjust this by hand. Like I can go and let's grab you as a vertex. Actually, what I really should have done is grab you two as a vertex. Grab you two as a vertex. There we go. So there's lots that we can do. Rather than dealing with vertices, let's go back. I can select edges. Which would have made more sense than vertices in this case. There we go. And then I can close this window. I can collapse all. And you can see that I've got two of my faces already. And you can see there's a little bit of an edge right here, and that's some of that's in the material, how I UV mapped. So the goal, your first assignment is basically to go in and basically texture, basically make the cube. This material has been given to you. Go in, make the cube. Show me again. And for the purpose of this assignment, show me, you're gonna have to give me a JPEG of the cube, showing, let's say if you do 1, 3, and 2, then the other 4, 5, 6 sides. So whatever these first 3 sides are gonna be, show me the other 3 sides as well on the same cube. You need to make an object that is multi-sub object. So again, you did make in your previous lab made 3 objects. Those 3 objects are part of this lab now to be textured. And then extra credit, texture the chess pieces. Give me a black material, white material. Go make materials for the black side, the white side. Give me, your grandfather clock. Go and basically build a material or materials for it. Your chessboard. I mean, that chessboard would be multi-sub object. That would be 3: the wood, the white side, and the black square, the white square material. Those are and if you've gone in, you've generated more. So those are the 3 materials that would be in there automatically. And so one of your objects do need to be multi-sub object. So if you don't do anything, go back to your checkerboard and then, your chessboard, do the outside border, that wood material in each of those. And your material would be basically 3 slices of three, you can do that with one material and UV map everything. Or you can try and do it using material IDs. Both are and the combination of both in some cases. So ideas of how to go about doing it. Gone around, shown you how to set material IDs, how to set smoothing groups, how to create those, again, how to make those materials, how multi-sub object, and that's your next assignment. After this assignment, basically, just so you know, if you're going forward, you're going to make a tile set. So we'll talk a little bit about, that's literally your next lecture, what we'll be talking about. All right, I've been talking for a while. Go forth and put materials onto your objects now. All right.